Hey everybody, I'm Jean Chatsky. Thank you so much for joining me today on HerMoney. On this show, our goal is always to give financial advice that works with no judgment and no strings attached. But here is the thing, there is no such thing as one size fits all financial advice. People from different backgrounds have different relationships with money. There are vast generational divides. What somebody who is looking at retirement needs to do with their money is completely different from what somebody who is fairly new to the working world should do with theirs. And on today's show, we're going to focus on that last group. We're going to focus on Gen Z. Gen Z, which is the term, the cohort of people born between 1997 and 2012, is already shaking up the workplace and the economy. They are more comfortable talking about salary with their friends and their coworkers. 82% say they want mental health days at work. More than 40% say they'd quit their jobs because of burnout or inadequate pay. In other words, it's pretty safe to say that Gen Zers are, well, they're confident in themselves and they are unafraid to stand up for their values. But they are also facing some unprecedented economic challenges. In just the past few years, they have dealt with a pandemic, sky-high inflation, rising rent and mortgage rates, all while trying to get through school or launch their careers. So it's no wonder that Gen Zers believe more than any other generation that they won't be able to retire and they won't be able to own a home. But I want to be clear that not everything is gloom and doom. There are resources out there to help you achieve the sort of financial life that you are looking for so that you can work toward those goals, toward buying that home, toward eventually retiring. And you don't have to do it all by yourself. HerMoney is here to help, as is my guest today, Taylor Price. Taylor is a proud member of Gen Z who navigated all the challenges that I just mentioned. And she realized that young people were not being taught enough about money in school or at home. So she started making videos about personal finance and posting them on TikTok and YouTube under the name Priceless Tay. Long story short, she now has more than 1 million followers, most of them Gen Z, all of whom are learning to budget, pay off debt, and invest through her videos. Taylor, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Jean. Super
Thank you
excited.
so much for being here. So, you had a little bit of an untraditional path to being a personal finance expert, a personal finance influencer. I read that you started college thinking that you might be pre-med. What happened?
Yes, so that is right. I have a spinal fusion, and for those of you listening right now, that's basically I two rods attached to my spine because of this thing called scoliosis, which is you think about if you ever watched the movie Hunchback of Notre Dame or Notre Dame, that was me at one point in my life. I had lung failure, heart failure as a result of my spine twisting in abnormal ways. And so when I was 14 in 2014, I ended up getting this spinal fusion. And at that time, because I had went through this procedure, I was like, I want to help other people who went through this same situation as me conquer this battle because it was a pretty traumatic battle that I had gone through. And I had an intrinsic motivation to help people. So eventually, I worked my way through high school, go to college, start pre med, only to find out that my own medical history and journey was going to put this huge bump in the road of can I actually come to reality and pursue this 14-year endeavor going to medical school and then doing 8 to 12 hour surgeries on patients when I myself have lupus. I've gone through the spinal fusion and still have some pain today. So after coming to terms and reflecting, I asked my mom, I don't think this is for me. This my spine is already hurting. I don't know where my scoliosis will be, 14 years after I'm done schooling, only to start my career then. What should I do with my life? She, in the 1980s, had graduated as a finance major from Baruch College, and she said, "Why don't you try out finance?" And so I was like, "Okay, let's drop everything and move on." And that was a little bit of a challenge for me because prior to going into finance, I spent a majority of my summers doing internships across the United States under a neurologist, going to different medical camps because that was a path that I thought that I was going to do. And so when I made this quick right turn into finance, I had no background or understanding on anything finance, both personal finance and corporate finance. So I ended up majoring in college with corporate finance, only to realize that I had no idea what was going on. I asked my guidance counselors, we're not talking about budgeting here. We're talking about like financial statements, income statements, statements of cash flow, balance sheets, looking at billions of dollars rather than, the few cents really that I had in my bank account at that time that I wasn't sure how to grow or build wealth or even pay taxes. And so I asked my guidance counselor, did I miss a few gen eds here? They said, nope, you're totally in the right place. Keep doing what you're doing. It's a rocky start, but trust us, you're going to do well. And I'm like, like I'm like 18 at the time. Should I get a credit card? Should I like start investing? And come to do the research back then in 2017, 2018 era, only 6 out of 50 states in the United States required a personal finance course for testing in high school. And the small town that I grew up in, Saugerties, New York, did not require financial education classes. And so I felt as an extreme disservice, not only to the state of New York, but really my colleagues and peers and cousins and family members across the United States. Why aren't we teaching this life skill? I mean, taxes aren't going away anytime soon. At least you could do us that service of teaching us how to pay those things, right? And so that's kind of when this thought appeared in my head. Well, if I don't know about it, and it's, the majority of the United States doesn't know about it, it needs to be talked about. And traditionally, as a society, like globally, we're taught not to talk about money, religion, and politics at the dinner table. And even then, at that time, it really wasn't talked about. And so
Yeah.
I decided to start a blog that discussed, I'm a finance major and I still don't know anything about my own personal finances. I'm not sure how you can trust if I graduate a 22-year-old looking at billion-dollar financial statements when my whatever salary, I don't know how to work that or budget that or how to grow that wealth. And so that message really started to grow on this blog. But as you said, targeting Gen Zers. I'm a Gen Zer. I'm 22 years old. Yeah, we love video content. And so writing a blog was good, but you know what was going to be great? Video content. And so
Video
that's when
content is
yeah.
where it's at. Yeah, it's such an
Hmm.
amazing story. I'm smiling at you as you're telling it because I so first of all, I saw so much of my son who's now 28 years old in your story. He too had a health crisis as a child and had amazing medical care and went to college thinking I am going to be a pediatric cardiologist. I am going to
Wow.
give back the way that these doctors gave back to me. And then he took chemistry, and that was the end of that. Um, it wasn't for him, and he's very happy working in sports these days. And it's but I do really understand when you've received such amazing care as a child, the feeling like of course I have to do that for somebody else
Hmm.
because it provided me with this quality of life that I have. The other thing that I wanted to say to you, though, is that you are giving back. That the education that you are providing at this mass level for people who really need it is incredible, and it's exactly you're probably touching a lot more individual lives than you would have had you continued on the way and become a doctor. And I hope that you feel good about that.
Oh, totally. Retrospectively, everything happens for a reason. And I couldn't be more grateful and blessed to be in the position that I'm in now. Like I said, I have a intrinsic motivation to help people. And boy, did I not realize how much of an impact you can have online. It's not just a one-to-one relationship, it can be a one-to-many relationship. And for those who traditionally didn't have access to financial education. Now you can go and speak to somebody relatable who's maybe in your similar demographic or age and have a conversation with them when you couldn't before. And so, yeah, like you said, it's been a very impactful journey, and I'm so blessed to be where I'm at right now.
You have a very nice way of making personal finance, which, look, I've been doing this for a long time. I know it has a reputation for being boring. You have a very nice way of making it fun. You don't make it intimidating. You present it in plain English, but you make it fun. What's the magic? Where's the fun come from?
I mean, I always grew up playing video games when I was younger. I was a video game connoisseur, so fun has definitely been in my nature. And come to realize that again, when speaking to younger people, you're not going to grab their attention if it's not fun. And so, how do you create something that's educational as well as entertaining and mix the two into this thing that I call edutainment? And so thinking about different arenas, like for example, if we're talking about an ETF, okay, that's kind of explained as a basket full of stocks. But if I was speaking to somebody who really loves makeup, why can't we talk about we got a makeup bag here, we got our lipstick as one potential stock, and our mascara as another, and we like doing our whole face. And so this way we all come together with this beautiful thing that is a quote ETF.
Very, very creative. Um, you're Gen Z. Your audience is also Gen Z. What do you think the big challenges facing Gen Z are? What sets Gen Zers? It's a lot harder to say Gen Z than you think it might be, especially when you try to put the ers on it. What do you think sets your generation apart? And what are you finding that people are having to deal with that other generations just didn't?
Well, I do think that there is a bunch of economic cycles that previous generations have seen. For example, extremely high inflation. My parents had to deal with that. We're now having to deal with that. And so that's especially too that the just the cost of groceries can be quite difficult when it comes to Gen Zers just having a lower cost of living. It almost becomes impossible to try and just live the bare minimum lifestyle in which where we're at today because of the pandemic and because of the recessions and layoffs. And like you said in the beginning of the show, the hard time getting a job, especially when we're just graduating college and we have these student loans that we have to pay off. So I do think that there will be a lot of challenges there, but I also think that there's challenges when it comes to just plain finance, like cryptocurrency and NFTs weren't really a thing a decade ago. And now the rate of technology and what we do have access to is like a hockey stick. So things are changing all the time. Like the Roth IRA, when I first started contributing to a Roth IRA, the contribution rate was, I think, $5,500 per year. Now I believe it's 6,500 per year. And I do this stuff every day. And so can only imagine if somebody who's taking a look at this once a month or once every few months, how they must feel when things are changing so very quickly. And I don't think that's just a Gen Z thing. I think that's a societal thing.
I remember about 15 years into my career reporting on money and giving financial advice. I was out for a run, and it occurred to me that although there were all of these things, all of these complicated things, and all of these new innovations changing the landscape every single year, there were really only five things that you needed to do if you wanted to have a successful financial life. And these five things have been a touchstone for me ever since. You got to earn some money. You got to spend less than you make. You got to
Mhm.
invest what you're not spending so that it can grow. You got to protect yourself with some insurance and an estate plan. And you got to figure out some way to give back, because that actually makes people happy.
Yep.
What are your five things? What are the most important things that Gen Zers need to know in order to get on their financial footing?
I believe you said it perfectly, and that spans across time. That's not just today. That can be in the next upcoming months. That can be in the future. The really starting off with the basics of spending less than you make and saving more. Now, what I mean by saving more isn't just putting it in a high yield savings account and not touching it, because again, Gen Zers were trying to beat off inflation. How can we make our money grow and work for us? Or this concept of what I call the money tree, which is you have your roots of this money tree and your savings accounts, your emergency fund, maybe some insurances, because when a storm comes by, those will hold you to the ground. Then you have your trunk as your primary source of income that can get wider as your income starts to grow. Then you start growing up to the top of the tree where you have these branches. These branches can create the money leaves, the things that can become passive, grow overnight. And that can be investing in the stock market. That can be investing in your side hustle and trying to make it into a full-time business. But these things are a lot more riskier than that of the bottom, the roots, the savings accounts, the emergency funds. But when you get more risk, obviously there's more rewards that can come in return. And so for me, it's always thinking about this concept of the money tree and where am I at in my finances right now, that I can continuously have a secure money tree, that when a storm comes by, I know that my roots are still going to be there and I'll be able to recover from this. And it also provides a peace of mind, but also the fact that my tree can grow and can create more money leaves, and thinking about those factors as well.
You and I both just you and I both just sort of let the words spend less than you make roll off our tongues very quickly. And what I know is that it's really hard. And it's particularly hard for a generation that is online all the time, dealing with a lot of FOMO. So we're going to take a very quick break. But when we come back, I want to dig into FOMO. And I want to understand how you prioritize the things that are really important. So, Taylor, FOMO, what do we do about it?
This is a great question because even I today still struggle with FOMO sometimes, especially in the realm of social media, being on it so often. For me, the way in which I combat FOMO when it comes for a financial sense is actually separating my financial accounts into play money and necessity money. So, what do I mean by this? I have my income going into one bucket, will then go into several other buckets. My needs, things like rent, groceries, car insurance, utilities, things like that, like necessities. If you can even think of medical prescriptions or something along the lines there too. Wants are those experiences that we're seeing online. That could be, hey, let's go to a trip to Cabo, or let's get that designer bag and save up for it. Now, it's really important that you also identify short-term wants versus long-term wants, because from what I see, especially with my generation, we want the instant gratification. Oh, I see this Chanel bag, although it's a good investment. I want it right now, instead of thinking about how can I eventually save for a house, or how can I save for marriage because weddings can be expensive, or how can I save for further education. And so separating those two buckets into short and long-term goals is something that I personally do. And lastly, uh, savings and investments. So hitting that latter part of, you have your savings account, that could be a high yield savings account for your emergency fund. And then you have your investments, starting to think about retirement, more again, the longer term goals, because again, this generation is so upfront and focused on what's right in front of them, not necessarily what's 20, 30, 40, 50 years look like.
That I think every generation when they're young is focused on what's right in front of them. But I have seen more surveys about this generation that say things very much like we were talking about at the top of the show, like I'll never be able to buy a house. I'll never be able to retire. What do you say to your followers who say that?
It all starts with the money mindset. If you believe that you can't, you can. If you believe that you can, you might. You can try, and you can go to different places because of the opportunity that you placed yourself in your mindset. And I'm a big believer in manifestation. And going back to my roots under neurology, there's this thing called the reticular activating system in your brain. It is the science of manifestation. So what does this mean? This is super scientific for me. Can you explain this in easy terms? Okay. If you see a blue car on the road, or you want a blue car, all of a sudden you start seeing blue cars everywhere. I'm like, or a particular dog that you saw on the internet one time, and now you start seeing it everywhere. You start seeing your name everywhere. This is your RAS, your reticular activating system, in motion. So if you tell yourself, you create a vision board, or you put it on the back of your phone case, or you put a little sticky note on your mirror every morning that says, I can and I will save for a house. You will place yourself subconsciously in different opportunities that you didn't see before because of this RAS, this reticular activating system. And so that's the very beginning. The second part, personally, as far as this not being able to save up for a house, I love automation. I think being in 2023 now, automation we can utilize in many different aspects of our lives, and finance is one of those aspects we can definitely use it. And so I like to automate any sort of savings that I have to help achieve those goals.
I had not heard of the reticular activating system, and I am going to
Yes.
study that because I'm fascinated with the different ways that we've learned from behavioral finance and
Mm-hmm.
neurologists how we can get beyond our own worst instincts.
Yep.
And this is a new one for me. So thank you for that, Taylor. One of the things that I've seen in my inbox over the past couple of weeks, and I think I've manifested them because I knew that you were coming on the show, but I've gotten a number of pitches, PR pitches from people who are really throwing some shade at financial advice that's being given on TikTok and on Reels and on Twitter. And I'm wondering if you've gotten any pushback.
Totally. When I first started, by the way, I have my bachelor's degree in finance, so I'm totally graduated. When I first started, I got a lot of criticism from Wall Street bros on Twitter. They were saying, "Who is this girl? She's 18 years old at the time. Who does she think that she can talk about investments online? Like, this is not normal. She should just be, getting her MRS, which is her missus, and getting married off." And I'm like, I don't think so. I'm going to continue pursuing this after having the conversation with my mom, who at the time, again, the 1980s, when she was a finance major, she was the only woman really in her class. And so that was, it's still traditionally a male-dominated field, but thankfully for, my mom and other strong women who have been in my life, it's something that I want to proceed with taking down the torch and sharing this mission and this vision and journey with others, because at the end of the day, it's not just about the influence, it's about the impact that we can have on our future generations. And so when journalists or publicists first come to me with some of these questions, it's like, okay, well, let's talk about, I did take my 4-year degree. I got the piece of paper that validates my credentials in this space, quote, quote. But here's also the information that is being provided. Here's the credentials. I've been on Good Morning America, Fox Business, Wall Street Journal. Like, after a certain point in time, it's like, okay, well, if all these other top tier business publications are talking about what wonderful financial education and service that people like me or myself have had in this community, then the questions kind of the answers are in the research. You just have to look a little further into them. But of course, I always tell people that social media should be the ignition to this journey, not the end. And so, for example, I didn't know what a Roth IRA was until I started looking online. And I believe Graham Stephan first introduced the concept to me, which at the time, and he still is a YouTuber. But I did not just stop there. I then contacted, my mom and other family members. Hey, do you know what a Roth IRA is? Like, have you heard of that? What's up with that? And then going to blogs like Investopedia and things like that, again, that also had real serious credentials to them. Hey, yeah, this is a real thing. And so making sure to do your own due diligence and, not just taking somebody's exact word for it, but really putting in the homework. The learning doesn't just stop when you're done with school. To me, it truly starts after school. And so that's what I have to say to anybody who kind of comes in the realm of questioning, financial educators online.
As we wrap this up, I'd love to know. I mean, we've got a lot of young women listening today. We've also got a lot of their mothers listening. What is your biggest piece of advice for the women in our audience who are maybe in the position that you were in a few years ago? They are just starting out and they're looking to get off on the right foot.
Continue to be change makers. I 100% believe that women in this day and age have the tools and the accessibility to do what they want when they want. And so there's a whole bunch of stats on, equal pay, and that women still aren't getting the quote man's dollar. But now we are in the understanding of, hey, this is how we can negotiate if we utilize these certain resources like ChatGPT to help us combat these certain circumstances. And so the person who understands the deal the most wins. And so if women can make themselves more educated and in different conversations or understandings wherever they're at in their life, then you're setting yourself up for success.
Taylor Price, thank you so much for doing this with me today.
Thank you, Jean.